The air in the courtroom hung thick with quiet, but beneath the quiet was a tempest waiting to burst. Kody Brown paced uncomfortably at the defense table, his jaw clenched and his eyes flicking from face to face. He had always been the focus, on TV or within his own household. But now attention wasn't admiration, it was judgment. His wives sat mere feet away, no longer at his side but across from him, together in suspicion and betrayal. Christine's fingers clutched a folder lying on the table in front of her. To everyone else it might have appeared as mundane paperwork, but to her it was a weapon, the first breach in Kody's well-crafted image. She had been quiet for years, suffering through favoritism, neglect, and the gradual disintegration of trust. But when she came upon the proof, papers, phone records, rumors that ballooned into unmistakable patterns, she realized the time for silence was over. She would no longer be a ghost in the narrative of his life. She would be the one to expose him. Next to her, Janelle sat forward, serene but intense, her gaze sharper than ever before. She wasn't into drama, but she was here because reality was more important than stage plays. She had witnessed the trail of money, the late-night phone calls, the unsanctioned weekend getaways. She didn't require cameras and admissions. She had facts, and those facts led to one point. There was another woman. Meri sat back, her posture stiff. Years of grief had made her hard, but her face still bore the memory of astonishment. She had been the first wife, the initial partner in Kody's plural marriage ideal. Now she was merely a witness to its demise. Her silence was not assent, it was weariness. She had no more words to justify him. And then there was Robyn. She was seated next to Kody, her face shaking between hope and fear. She longed to believe him, to have faith that the man she stood up for on TV, the man she referred to as her soulmate, was not capable of this kind of deception. But in her heart, she sensed the icy clutch of doubt. Whenever Christine looked in her direction, whenever Janelle spoke to the lawyer, that doubt grew louder. The biggest wars are waged with fists and weapons, but with secrets that are brought out into the daylight. The judge cleared his throat, his tone stern, as he declared the case would move forward. Papers rustled, lawyers stood, Christine's lawyer moved first, his voice even but purposeful. He portrayed a picture of a man who had betrayed not only his wives, but also the very principles of trust and faith he professed to hold dear. A man who had supposedly committed himself to another woman in secret, keeping vows and creating a life under the covers. Kody shook his head, grumbling under his breath. His attorney scribbled busily, cautioning him to be silent. But Christine's eyes never wavered from him. She wanted him to glance at her, to behold the anger, the brokenness, the betrayal etched on her features. The first evidence was presented. Phone records, strange hour calls, to unknown numbers not belonging to business contacts or relatives. Long calls, sometimes on evenings when Kody said he was too busy to have dinner with the family. Silences were allowed to hang by Christine's lawyer after reading out the records. Every second made the air tighter, and the gallery leaned forward, listening, waiting. Kody's attorney protested, arguing the calls had shown nothing, that they might have been to anyone. But Christine had more to say. She stood up, her voice slicing through the silence like a knife. She reported to the court on the evening she discovered the receipt hidden in Kody's jacket. A night's stay at a hotel, 2 states away, on a night he had said he'd spent traveling for work. The name on the receipt was not his, her name. A woman Christine had never met, but whose name seared her brain. Every falsehood leaves an imprint, and sometimes it is the smallest one to shatter the largest illusion. The courtroom stirred. Robyn gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Meri lowered her gaze. Janelle nodded slowly, her suspicion confirmed. Kody's face flushed red, anger rising like a tide. He slammed his hand on the table, insisting it was all lies, manipulation, exaggeration. But his voice cracked at the edges, and that crack was all it took. The judge told him to sit. The gavel came down once, silencing everyone. But order was also an illusion. Under it, chaos brewed. The wives glanced at each other, a silent agreement made between them. Whatever was to come, they were no longer enemies in their shattered family. They were together against the man who had shattered them all. Outside the courtroom, cameras lingered. Reporters murmured tidbits into their microphones, the story already brewing in headlines nationally. The world needed to know if the gossip was true. The world needed to see a man who once professed his faith and leadership, brought low by the burden of his own deceit. Within, Christine's lawyer proceeded with the next evidence. A photo, blurry, far away, but irrefutable. Kody flanked by a woman in front of a tiny chapel in Nevada. Their fingers intertwined, their smiles too intimate to be explained as amiable. The picture had been anonymous when it arrived at Christine's home, a letter in her mailbox with no return address. But now, it was at the center of her case. The gallery broke into whispers, the noise like static in the air. Robyn shook her head wildly, whispering, "No, no, it's not true." Kody insisted the photo be disregarded, his attorney yelling about authenticity. But it was too late. The picture was seared into the minds of everyone in the room. Once a picture is seen, it can't be unseen. And once suspicion takes hold, it spreads like wildfire. The judge accepted the photo into evidence. Christine leaned back, gasping for breath, her hands shaking. She had borne this burden alone for too long. Now the world bore it with her. Janelle leaned in closer, whispering something in Christine's ear. Christine nodded, her eyes welling up with tears. This was just the start. There was more, much more. And as the hour closed in, Christine's lawyer threw one last bomb, a list of witnesses, names that made Kody's eyes go wide with fear. Among them was a name the world had never heard but would never forget. The name of the girl in the picture. The putative fifth wife. The courtroom was stilled. The atmosphere was charged. For a brief instant, even the judge was frozen in tension. Then he declared that court would reconvene the following day to start hearing witness testimonies. The gavel came down. Once, twice. The session adjourned, but the war had just started. What would you do if the person you most trusted turned out to be leading a double life? Hold that thought, because the solutions coming in the next session will rock this family to its very foundations. The courtroom was overcrowded the following morning, the atmosphere thicker than yesterday. Reporters covered all corners, cameras lined up outside, and murmurs circulated like wildfire in the gallery. The name disclosed at the close of yesterday's hearing was still fresh in everyone's memory. The so-called fifth wife, a name previously anonymous, now scribbled in black letters on the list of witnesses. The world wanted to know whether she existed, and today was the day her response would start to be shaped. Kody came into the room ahead of everyone, his shoulders straight, his jaw clenched in rage. He was like a man going to war, but even his battle-hardened posture couldn't conceal the telltale nervous flicker in his eyes. He shunned Christine's eyes, wouldn't meet Janelle's, and looked at Robyn only for reassurance. Robyn touched his arm, mouthing words he didn't listen to fully. Her own belief was breaking down, though she made an effort to remain strong. Christine sat quietly at her table, her hands folded into fists, her knuckles white. She wasn't here to perform. She was here to speak the truth. For too long she had been quiet, her voice silenced behind the walls of plural marriage and the expectation of loyalty. Today she would speak, and her words would burn. Janelle sat next to her, her face stern and determined. Meri sat slightly further back, still torn, but the angle of her jaw indicated she would no longer defend Kody. The judge arrived, and everyone stood. The session opened. The lawyer for Christine called the first witness, Christine herself. The breath appeared to leave the room as she moved towards the podium. Her steps were firm, but with each step, her heart thudded. She extended her hand, took her oath, and seated herself, the eyes of the world fastened on her. The interrogation had started tentatively, her lawyer guiding her through the tale of how she learned the gossip. She talked of the midnight phone calls Kody attempted to conceal, the hotel bill she uncovered, the peculiar absences he dismissed with feeble explanations. Her voice shook occasionally, but she remained in control. Each word sounded careful, each detail inscribed in pain and memory. Kody seethed, his attorney taking furious notes, but Christine continued. She recounted the night she had caught him, the night his eyes betrayed him in spite of his words attempting to deny. She drew the picture of a man who became reckless, a man who had thought his wives would always be quiet. When silence breaks, truth flows forth louder than lies ever could. The lawyer instructed her to bring back the memory of when she received the photo. Christine squeezed her eyes shut for a second, collecting herself. She told them about the envelope in her mail, the trembling hands which produced the grainy picture. She told them about sitting at her kitchen table fixing the gaze of it for hours, unable to breathe, unable to accept. She told them about the anger that ran through her, but about the grief too. The agony of finding out the family she had struggled for was already broken by a secret that he never meant to reveal. The photograph was held up before the court once more. Gasps were heard circulating in the gallery as Christine's voice trembled. "That's him," she said, her finger not faltering as it pointed right at Kody. "That's my husband," standing next to another lady in front of a chapel. Kody leapt to his feet, face flushed, voice thundering as he bellowed, "It's a lie, a setup. You don't know what you're talking about." The judge's gavel came down, commanding silence, demanding order, but it was too late. The jury had glimpsed something more than a denial. They had seen fear. Christine's eyes blazed with anger as she stared at him. "I know what I saw, Kody, and in your heart so do you." The courtroom hummed, the audience murmuring, pens tapping over notepads. The judge directed Kody to sit, his attorney roughly yanking him back into his seat. Christine went on, her tone stronger now. She told of the late nights, the fights, the way he treated Robyn differently from the others, the imbalance that seemed to widen with each passing year. This wasn't favoritism anymore, though. This was betrayal to the very bone. The instant that a secret gets out, it ceases to be power and becomes poison. The defense lawyer finally stood up, his voice cutting, prepared to dismantle Christine's testimony. He accused her of jealousy, of bitterness, of revenge for having left the marriage. He challenged her motives, portraying her as a scorned woman who had nothing better to do than ruin Kody's reputation. Christine didn't blink, her tone didn't tremble. "This has nothing to do with revenge," she told him, keeping her gaze fixed on Kody. "This is about truth. And if being truthful makes me sound bitter, then so be it. At least I won't appear to be a liar." The gallery erupted in murmurs, some gasps audible, some nods of agreement. Even the judge paused, his expression unreadable, as he restored order again. The tension was thick, almost unbearable. Every word hung in the air like smoke, choking anyone who dared to breathe. Christine got down from the stand, her testimony over. She passed by Kody, not once looking at him, her head held high. Janelle reached out and gave her a squeeze of comfort as she took back her seat. Meri turned away, not able to look at either of them. Robyn's face was white, her lips quivering, but she gritted her teeth to remain quiet. At times, the loudest scream in a court is the silence of the person who holds the truth but cannot utter it. The judge summoned the next witness, Janelle. She stood, her demeanor serene, her presence held together, but her eyes burning. Where Christine had spoken in anguish, Janelle spoke with logic. She told of the books she had discovered, the mysterious withdrawals, the deposits into accounts no one was aware of. She testified about how the funds trail back to the same city where the supposed fifth wife resides. The proof piled up. The air in the room thickened with each sentence. Kody's face was beginning to glisten with sweat, his attorney clearly agitated, objecting time and time again, only to be overruled. Robyn clasped her hands together so tightly that they turned white. Janelle's voice cracked only once, when she talked about the children, the way they would ask about their father, why he never appeared for birthdays or school functions, the way she had to smile and lie, covering for him when he was really hundreds of miles away. Her tears were silent, but her words cut deeper than any accusation. The truth hurts most when spoken through the tears of someone who once defended you. When Janelle was done, she sat next to Christine, two women bound by betrayal and valor. Kody's attorney attempted to create the image of a conspiracy, of wives coordinating their efforts to destroy him. But fractures in Kody's defense were spreading. His wrath was too obvious, his denials too frantic, his tale too transparent. Finally, the judge called for a recess, the gavel cracking once more. The room broke into chaos, reporters scrambling to write stories, murmurs filling the gallery, and flashes of cameras as the wives emerged together from the courtroom. Kody stayed at the table, his hands clenched on the edge so hard his knuckles went white. Robyn placed a hand on his shoulder, but he shook her off, and as the courtroom cleared, the gravity of what was to come lingered. The list of witnesses stretched long, and the name that everyone waited to be summoned had not yet arrived. The fifth wife, the more a secret is dug under, the bigger the boom when it finally comes out. The wives recognized that the war was just starting. The judge recognized the trial had barely started. And Kody, for the first time, seemed to realize his control was being taken away. What followed would not only seal his destiny, but reveal the very premise on which he had established the family on shaky vows. The next witness was prepared, and the name everyone was whispering about was soon going to enter the courtroom. The courtroom was different when they came back from recess. The audience was bigger, the whispering more insistent, the air thicker. Everybody knew who was arriving. The fifth wife? Her name was no longer ink on a witness list. It was a breathing entity hovering outside, and her footsteps into the stand would determine whether this trial was rumor or truth. Kody sat rigid at the defense table, his gaze snapping toward the door with every creak of the hinges. His skin was white, his jaw locked so hard that it seemed his teeth would shatter. Robyn leaned in close, but the minute she did, she whispered something, and his hand jerked wildly, pushing her away. He didn't need comfort, he needed control, but that control was slipping through his fingers like sand. Christine leaned forward, arms crossed, eyes fixed on him. She was no longer here for vengeance. She was here for justice. Janelle's eyes were colder, the pain of betrayal suffocating them into stone. Even Meri, long silent, leaned forward a little, as if prepared to listen to the truth she had not wanted to hear. The bailiff opened the door. The gallery fell silent. All heads turned as footsteps clicked down the aisle, and then she was there. A woman, maybe in her late 30s, walked solidly towards the witness stand. She wasn't dressed for show. She hadn't come to perform. She had on a simple dark dress, her hair pinned back, her eyes streaming as if she'd already cried before entering. The silence walked behind her like a bodyguard. She raised her hand, swore the oath, and took her seat. The lawyer advanced, his tone gentler than before. No theatrics were required. The moment itself was the theater. State your name for the record. She delivered it clearly, her voice steady though it shook at its edges. The name was said out loud, and the room seemed to vibrate. The same name Christine had discovered on the hotel receipt. The same name on the witness list. She existed. Kody's face contorted, eyes becoming a mixture of anger and hysteria. His attorney spoke furiously under his breath, but Kody shook his head, muttering. Robyn's mouth opened, but nothing escaped. The lawyer moved closer. Miss, do you recognize the defendant, Kody Brown? Her response was like a cut through silence. Yes, I do, because I married him. The courtroom was shocked as if by thunder. A few stood, others put hands to their mouths, the gallery erupting in whispers. The judge banged the gavel, calling for silence, but the surprise could not be kept under wraps. The fifth wife was no longer a mere rumor. She was right before them, admitting to promises sworn in secret. The instant truth is uttered, denial no longer has a place to hide. Christine's eyes were filled with tears, not with sadness. It was vindication. Janelle's face only grew harder, her lips clamped tight. Meri shook her head, still in denial, as reality and denial battled inside her. And Robyn disintegrated. Tears poured down her face, her body shaking as she whispered, "No, no, this can't be." The interrogation went on. The lawyer instructed her to expound. She narrated how she had met Kody years ago, how he had vowed to love her and protect her, how he had whispered in her ear that she was different, that she was destined to be with his family. He had informed her she could never be featured on the show, never make anyone aware, because the world would not comprehend. And she listened to him. She listened to every utterance. She told of the night of the clandestine wedding, miles away from the lens, the two of them and a justice of the peace, who signed forms without querying too hard. She told of the way he placed a ring on her finger, not one like his other wives wore, but one that she secretly kept in a drawer. She told of the weekend trysts, the secret life constructed in whispers and deceit. Each word broke the air, each detail hit like a hammer against glass. Some tales are unbelievable, until the one who experienced them stands before you and swears them into being. Kody's attorney protested, alleging forgery, demanding no court record, no certificate, but the woman fished into her purse, her hands trembling, and produced papers. The courtroom waited with bated breath as the papers were handed to the judge. Marriage license, witness signatures, dates and stamps corresponding to the chronology Christine had uncovered. The judge read them, his face inscrutable, and then returned them to the clerk. The evidence was stamped. The gavel banged. The papers were officially part of the trial. Kody could not contain himself any longer. He leapt to his feet, bellowing, his voice shaking with urgency. "She's lying! She's lying to kill me! This is a conspiracy!" His voice died away, but the gallery was not convinced. His anger appeared less truth and more terror. The judge shouted for silence, his voice thunderous, and warned that he would hold Kody in contempt. Kody thudded into his chair, his chest gasping for air, his face afire with rage. The fifth wife didn't blink. She sat with her hands crossed in her lap, her eyes glassy but unflinching. "You said forever to me," she said quietly, her voice shaking. "But I can see now, your forever was only a lie." The words lingered in the air, heavier than any blow of the gavel, heavier than any cry of denial. Even Robyn was looking away from Kody, unable to face him. Betrayal is not only the violation of a promise, it's the violation of a soul. The lawyer continued to question. "You knew about his other wives?" "Yes," she confessed. "He told me about them. But he said they no longer loved him. He said I was the only one who cared, the only one who understood him. He said they were cold, bitter, jealous. He led me to believe I was rescuing him from them." Christine's mouth curled in cynical anger. Janelle's fists balled up. Meri shut her eyes, the pain of manipulation clawing back memories she would have liked to forget. Kody's attorney stood up, initiating the cross-examination. His tone was cutting, attempting to discredit, attempting to destroy her. He tested her memory, the validity of the records, why she had decided to step forward now. He accused her of desiring fame, attention, cash. But she stood firm. "I didn't do it for fame," she explained. "I did it because the truth is important, and because these women needed to know." Her voice cracked then, tears falling as she gazed at Christine, Janelle and Meri. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I had no idea how far his lies went." The courtroom fell silent, the audience shocked. Even the judge sat back, his eyes tightened in contemplation. The truth was not tidy, it wasn't straightforward, but it was indubitable. Kody sat stiff, his hands shaking, his face twisted into something no one had ever seen. Not arrogance, not anger, but fear. True fear. Because the house of cards he had constructed was coming apart before him, and nothing could stop it now. The taller a lie is constructed, the more solidly it falls when the truth knocks it over. The judge once again summoned order and brought the day's proceedings to a close. The gavel came down, but the reverberations were different today. The case was not about suspicion or gossip anymore. It was about evidence. Evidence in the shape of a woman's voice, papers, and years of lying. As the courtroom cleared, Christine strode past Kody, her shoulders set, her eyes fixed ahead. Janelle trailed behind, quiet but intense. Meri stood back, her expression impassive, her silence more potent than words. And Robyn exited last, tears on her face, her life in ruins as much as anyone's. Kody sat at the table, looking down at his hands, his attorney speaking in hushed tones but no words penetrating. He sat alone now, one surrounded by several but deserted by faith. And somewhere deep within, he was certain tomorrow would be worse. For the truth had been uttered and the fifth wife had spoken. When truth finally speaks, it doesn't just conclude the tale, it commences the war. The following morning, the courthouse was more full than ever. News vans occupied the street, reporters clustered under umbrellas with cameras aimed at the doors, and the jeers of protesters and supporters alike echoed across the steps. The fifth wife's name spread across headlines overnight, fueling debates, speculation, and outrage. What was once reality TV drama was now a national scandal, and everybody waited with bated breath to see what would happen next. Within, the courtroom reverberated with expectation. The jury filed into position, their tired faces washed with tension, but full of interest. The press packed the gallery, their mouths agape speculating about the papers shown yesterday, about the lady who testified that she wed Kody in private. They sought answers, and today would see those answers tested. Kody strode in with a glare, his attorney holding his arm tightly, urging him to remain calm. But his eyes gave him away. They were mad, desperate, zigzagging from wall to wall, as if searching for a door to open. He dropped into the chair hard, his fists on the table, his chest heaving with short gasps. Robyn followed him, her face washed white, her eyes puffy with nights of weeping. She sat beside him, but still there was space, a gap between them that could no longer be kept secret. Christine sat rigid, arms crossed, eyes unforgiving. Janelle matched her poise, though her mouth remained compressed so tightly it was as if it hurt. Meri leaned forward, hands folded in prayer, though no prayer would stop what was happening. The judge demanded order, his gavel ringing once. The defense would proceed next. It was Kody's turn to testify. The courtroom fell still as he stood up, fastening his jacket, attempting to gather the shreds of dignity. He made his way towards the stand, raised his hand, took the oath, and sat down. For an instant he closed his eyes, breathed slowly out, as if willing himself to peace. His lawyer started with a gentle series of questions, casting him as the man who had been misunderstood. A father of many children, a husband burdened by duty. Kody nodded, his voice soft at first, attempting to be reasonable, attempting to take control. He lies about everything. He said the woman was lying, that the papers were forged, that Christine and Janelle had conspired to ruin him. His words made him the victim, betrayed by those who had professed to love him, but not in the courtroom. The jury shifted uneasily. The gallery murmured, Christine's jaw clenched, and then the cross-examination. Christine's lawyer stood up, his tone biting but under control. He asked Kody about the phone calls, the receipt from the hotel, the picture. Every denial Kody made was followed by another piece of evidence, another inconsistency, another lie exposed. His voice increased in volume, his movements more agitated, his composure fraying like a mask on the verge of tearing apart. The louder the denial, the greater the fear that underlies it. The lawyer leaned forward, his voice slicing through the tension. Mr. Brown, are you saying this court that all of this evidence, all of these photographs, all of these documents, and even the testimony of the woman herself is manufactured? Yes, Kody bellowed, banging his fist on the stand. Yes, it's all false. They're jealous. They've always been jealous. His face flushed, veins bulging at his temples, his voice cracking with anger. The gavel came down, commanding silence. The judge cautioned him to rein himself in, but too late. The jury had witnessed not confidence but desperation. Christine's lawyer pursued further. And what about Robyn, Mr. Brown? Does she know about these so-called lies? Has she herself been misled? Everyone looked at Robyn. She stood stock still, her hands shaking, her eyes wide with terror. She stared at Kody, her mouth open, but nothing emerged. He glared at her, his eyes ordering her to remain quiet. Silence spoke more than anything she might have uttered. Sometimes the truth comes out not in words, but in the silence of a person who can no longer protect a falsehood. Tears rolled down Robyn's cheeks as she buried her face in her hands. The gallery gasped, some whispering that her silence was confirmation, others shaking their heads in pity. Christine's eyes softened for a brief moment, not out of forgiveness, but recognition of the pain of being deceived. Janelle turned her gaze forward, her jaw tightening. Meri's hands trembled, her face pale. The attorney pressed further, but Kody snapped, shouting, his words tumbling over each other. "She's my wife. She believes me. She knows I'd never do this. They're trying to poison her against me." His voice echoed, but his words fell flat. Robyn shook her head slightly, tears staining her blouse, her silence louder than his screams. The judge called for recess once more, his tone commanding, his good humor fraying, but the court was charged. Whispers ran through the hall, pens scrawled wildly, and cameras outside prepared for the breaking news. As the courtroom cleared, Robyn sat in her chair, shaking. Kody leaned in close to her, hissing softly under his breath, his eyes inches from hers. No one heard what he was saying, but his face was enough. Anger, betrayal, desperation. She winced, moving away, her tears never ceasing. Christine observed them, her heart weighted with a twisted combination of vindication and grief. This was not what she had wished. She hadn't wished to witness Robyn shatter. But the truth is unforgiving, sparing none, not even the preferred wife. When deceptions disintegrate, they do not only dismantle the culpable, they shatter all those who are too near. The next day's session of testimony picked up later in the afternoon. This time Robyn herself was summoned to the stand. The atmosphere changed, thick with anticipation. She approached slowly, her steps hesitant, her shoulders bent under the burden of expectation. She took the oath, her voice almost inaudible. Her lawyer asked her softly if she thought the things were true. Her voice shook when she replied, I don't know anymore." Gasps ran through the courtroom. Robyn had doubt for the first time. She told of nights Kody went missing, lies that never panned out, nights when she herself sensed something was amiss, but overrode her own feelings to maintain family harmony. Her tears streamed freely as she admitted, "I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think that I was special, that he would not do this. But now I don't know." Kody's face contorted in horror, his hand clenched around the table so hard his knuckles were white. He shook his head back and forth wildly, muttering to himself, his attorney holding onto his shoulder to keep him in his seat. The worst hurtful betrayal is not when your opponent questions you, but when the person dearest to your heart stops believing in you. The courtroom was silent, shocked, as Robyn finished her testimony. She descended from the witness stand, her body shaking, her tears tearsless. She passed Kody by without a word, without an embrace, without a glance, and in that silence everyone knew the ground of his defense had been shaken. The judge declared that the trial would proceed the next day with additional witnesses and testimony. His gavel came down, but it lacked more control than it did a sense of countdown. A countdown to the impending destruction of a man who once said he kept it all together. The wives exited the courtroom in silence, their footsteps heavy but definite. The gallery exploded once again, as reporters poured outside to break the news. Headlines would howl of Robyn's collapse, of her uncertainty, of Kody's defense dissolving. And Kody? He sat still, blank eyes gazing forward, as though trying to reassure himself that this was all just a dream from which he could awaken. Nightmares don't stop, though, when the gavel drops. They only become darker. And tomorrow, the shadows would show him the final fragments of truth that would totally annihilate him. The courthouse seemed chillier that morning, as if the walls themselves were aware of what was about to hit them. Outside, double the madness reigned. Reporters yelled out questions to anyone who entered. Cameras blazed, and mobs waved signs, some in condemnation of Kody, others in his defense. The world was no longer watching, it was taking sides. Inside, the wives marched to their seats, with the austerely determined look of soldiers marching into war. Christine sat first, chin up high, determination unwavering. Janelle came next, a pile of folders under her arm that promised what was to be. Meri hesitated, her face impassive, but no longer averted. And Robyn brought up the rear, her body weighed down by fatigue, eyes still pink from crying. She sat near Kody but angled away slightly, as if even closeness seared. Kody came in last, his once confident pace now fractured. He appeared somehow smaller, his bravado eroded by testimony, by evidence, by doubt. He fiddled with his tie, affecting a smirk, as if the cameras could still be deceived. But beneath, the fear was seeping in. He knew what came next, and he dreaded it. The judge called for order, and the day's proceedings began. Christine's attorney rose, his voice calm but sharp, as he announced the focus: finances. The room stilled, the gallery leaning forward in anticipation. Everyone knew that paper trails told truths, words could not. The first evidence was flashed on screen: bank statements, large withdrawals of money to accounts the wives did not know, dates corresponding to the very weekends Kody had spent away. The lawyer described how money had been routed through shell accounts, concealed from the joint funds of the family. He discussed properties bought in far-off towns, in names the wives had never heard. Kody squirmed in his chair, his jaw clenched. His attorney protested, invocation of irrelevance, but the judge overruled. The papers were in. Money is the fingerprint of betrayal, and once traced, lies have no disguise. The second item on the list was a deed. A residence bought 2 years ago, in Kody's signature, with the purported fifth wife as co-owner. Gasps punctuated the courtroom, the viewing area breaking into a flurry of whispers. Christine's hand was shaking as she looked at the screen, anger and vindication warring in her heart. Janelle's lips were set in a thin line, her suspicion now unquestionable fact. Kody huddled beside his attorney, cursing in a low tone, his complexion ashen. It was too late though. The truth was revealed, written in black and white. The fifth wife herself was brought back onto the stand. She trembled, saying they owned the house, that she lived there with him in lengths of time, sometimes months, that he had promised her a future, promising her children safety with money she subsequently found out was family money. She wept as she barely spoke. I didn't know it came from them. The gallery was shocked into silence. Robyn shook her head wildly, her sobs stifled by her hand. Meri closed her eyes, silently weeping for tears to drop down her cheeks. Christine sat stiff, anger emanating from her like waves of heat. Janelle wrote furiously, every word a blow to the coffin. Kody's attorney attempted to save the moment. Forgery, manipulation, a conspiracy intended to destroy his client were his suggestions, but the forensic accountant on the stand deconstructed it all. Coolly in charge, he followed the transactions, tying every withdrawal, every shell account, every penny back to Kody. The figures told a tale that no denial could rewrite. Paper cannot lie. And when figures talk, they talk louder than excuses. Kody's face turned red, fists curled. He herself cried out objections, demanding to be heard, claiming he was a victim of a setup. The judge threatened contempt once more, slamming the gavel, but his tirades only widened the gaps in his defense. Christine's lawyer posed the last question to the accountant. Where did the bulk of these funds come from? The response came sharp, biting, and explicit. From accounts identified as family money, accounts held by all the wives and children. The courtroom exploded. Gasps, screams, murmurs. The gallery leaned forward, pens scribbling on notepads. Reporters urgently whispered into their tape recorders. The wives stiffened, the realization hitting them. This was not just about vows broken. This was theft. Theft from the very people he professed to guard. Kody's voice was booming, shaking with anger. They wanted this. They didn't care about the money. They left me no choice. His words lingered in the air, jagged and bitter, but no one believed him. Not anymore. The moment excuses substitute for truth, the battle is already lost. Robyn shattered then, her body racked with sobs. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor, her voice cracking. Stop, Kody. Just stop. Her wail was raw and unfiltered. Tears streamed down her face as she yelled, I stuck up for you. I believed you. And you lied to me too. The courtroom came to a standstill. Even the judge reclined, surprised at her explosion. Kody's face twisted in anger, his hand hitting the table. Sit down, he growled, his voice low and venomous. But Robyn didn't. She stood shaking, her face wet with tears, her voice cracking. You destroyed everything. You destroyed us. She slumped back into her seat, crying helplessly. The gallery was hushed, the press of her collapse feeling like a storm. Christine's eyes shone, Janelle's lips quivered, and Meri at last allowed her tears to flow freely. It was not victory that they felt in that instant. It was tragedy. The judge finally regained control, his gavel coming down hard. He declared that the proceedings would go on with more evidence and witnesses. But the mood had shifted. The illusion of defense was lost. What was left was desperation. As dusk approached, Christine's lawyer landed a final punch. Tomorrow, witnesses associated with the chapel where the supposed marriage occurred would take the stand, he said. An officiant. A witness to vows, Kody said. Never did. The gallery gasped, whispers flooding like waves. Kody's experience turned his face a ghostly white. He glanced at his wives, at the jury, at the judge, but there was no anchor, no salvation. He was being swept under by his own deceit, and tomorrow the water would come higher. When truth mobilizes witnesses, denial is merely noise. The gavel came down, and the session was adjourned. Slowly the courtroom cleared, journalists running for the exits, cameras popping outside. The wives left hand in hand, heavy silence but intact. Robyn lingered behind, shattered, her walk unsteady. Kody sat for a long time, vacant-eyed, staring at the papers laid out in front of him. His lawyer murmured tactics, and he didn't listen. His thoughts were stuck in the walls, closing in. For the first time, he did not resemble a man fighting for innocence, but rather a man anticipating the unavoidable. And as he finally stood up, his legs weighed down, the gallery's gaze followed him with the weight of condemnation. He walked out slowly, slouching his shoulders, his empire crumbling behind him. Tomorrow the officiant would mount the stand, and with him the last tenuous thread of Kody's defense would break. The truth was no longer arriving, it had arrived, and the coup de grace was just a day away.